The slap cracked through the wedding hall so loud that the band stopped playing mid-note. I didn't see it coming. One moment I was standing near the cake table, holding a glass of water I hadn't touched, watching the room swirl around me in ribbons of white and gold. The next moment, my head snapped sideways, my ears rang like a fire alarm, and the left side of my face burned with a heat so sharp it stole my breath. The room went silent. 300 people, in their finest clothes, holding their champagne flutes, mid-laugh, mid-sentence. All of them stopped and stared at me. The bride stood in front of me, ivory silk, lace sleeves, hair pinned up with pearl clips that probably cost more than my monthly pension. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful. Polished, deliberate, impossible to look away from. And she was looking at me the way people look at something they've accidentally stepped in. "Look at you," she said. Her voice was low, but the room was so quiet that everyone heard every word. "You clumsy old woman. Don't you dare touch my dress again." I did not cry. I did not scream. I stood there with my hand pressed to my cheek, and I thought only one thing. What happens when my son finds out that the woman who just slapped his mother is the woman he married an hour ago? My name is Margaret Calloway. Most people call me Maggie. I am 65 years old. I taught 3rd grade for 31 years at Millbrook Elementary in Nashville, Tennessee. I bake lemon pound cake for the church bake sale every April. I keep a jar of butterscotch candies on my kitchen counter. I cry at the end of every episode of Call the Midwife, without fail, every single time. I am not a dramatic woman. I did not expect the day my son got married to be the day I understood what it feels like to be truly invisible. But let me go back, because nothing that happened that day was an accident, and you cannot understand where we ended up without knowing where we started. My husband James died 8 years ago, pancreatic cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the morning I held his hand in a hospital room in Nashville while the sun came up orange outside the window and he took his last breath. Thomas was 26. He drove through the night from Atlanta when I called him, and he arrived just in time to say goodbye to his father. After James, it was just the two of us. Thomas called every Tuesday evening, without fail, without reminder. 6:30, my phone would ring, and it would be him, telling me about his week, asking about mine, laughing about something small, checking that the gutters were cleaned and the furnace had been serviced, and that I was eating real meals and not just cereal for dinner. "Mom, you're my compass," he used to say. I never knew exactly what he meant by that, but it filled something in my chest every time he said it. Then, 18 months before the wedding, Thomas met Diane. The Tuesday calls became Tuesday texts, then every other week texts. Then, in the last few months before the wedding, short replies that always ended the same way. "Busy right now, Mom. Talk soon." I kept a photo on my nightstand. Thomas at 9 years old, gap-toothed and sunburned, holding up a drawing he'd made of a house with a crooked chimney. He'd written across the bottom in red crayon, "For Mom, the best person in the world." I looked at that photo every night before I turned off the light. I wondered more than once whether that little boy was still in there somewhere. 6 weeks before the wedding, I finally met Diane. Thomas brought her to my house in Nashville. They arrived at 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon, and they left at 2:20. I know because I looked at the clock both times. I had made sweet tea and set out the good china, the blue-rimmed set that James's mother gave us as a wedding gift, the one I only bring out for special occasions. Diane arrived carrying her own coffee in a stainless steel travel mug. She was striking in person. Tall, elegant, the kind of put together that looks effortless, but isn't. She stood in the center of my living room and smiled with her mouth in a way that didn't reach her eyes, and she said, "What a cozy little place," in a tone that made cozy sound like a polite word for something else. I offered her sweet tea. She said she didn't take sugar. I asked about her family, where she grew up, whether her parents were coming to the wedding. She glanced at Thomas and said, "Why don't you fill her in, babe?" and then looked down at her phone. When I asked what she did for work, she gave me a title, something with Director in Strategic Development in it, and moved on before I could ask what it meant. At 2:17, she touched Thomas on the arm. "Babe, the venue coordinator needs us at 4. Thomas stood up. I walked them to the door. He hugged me, a real hug, tight and warm, and whispered, "Thanks for the tea, Mom." I watched him follow Diane down the front steps, his shoulders slightly forward, like a man trying to keep up with someone walking too fast. That night, I called my best friend Carol Simmons. We've known each other for 40 years, since we were both young teachers at Millbrook, before either of us had gray hair or bad knees. "Carol," I said, "something's wrong. I don't know what, but something's wrong." Carol said, "Maggie, you're overthinking it. He loves her. Give her time." I didn't say anything for a long moment. Then I said, "I hope you're right." But I knew the way mothers know things, quietly in the back of your chest where logic doesn't reach, that I wasn't wrong. The wedding was held on a Saturday in April at the Hartwell Grand, a restored event hall in Buckhead, Atlanta. 300 guests, white peonies and eucalyptus, string quartet, the kind of wedding that gets photographed for a magazine. Carol drove with me from Nashville. 4 hours. We talked about everything and nothing. Her granddaughter's soccer games, the new pastor at our church, whether the dogwoods would bloom early this year. We did not talk about what I was feeling because I didn't have words for it yet. I wore my best dress, sage green with a small pearl brooch at the collar. The brooch had belonged to Thomas's grandmother, James's mother, and I had planned, quietly and privately, to give it to Diane after the ceremony as a gesture of welcome. A small thing, a quiet thing, the kind of gesture that says you are family now without making a fuss about it. I also wore low heels, sensible ones, because I am 65 and I have learned that some battles are not worth fighting. We arrived 40 minutes early. I told Carol I wanted a moment to collect myself before the crowds came in. The truth was, I was hoping to find Thomas, to see his face before he became a husband, to hold his hand for a moment and tell him I was proud of him. A young woman in a headset met us at the door. She looked at her clipboard when I gave my name. She looked again. "I'm sorry," she said. "I don't see a Margaret Calloway on the seating arrangement." I smiled. "I'm the groom's mother." She blinked. "Oh, just a moment." She pressed her earpiece and murmured something. We waited. She murmured something else. Then she looked up with a professionally apologetic expression and said, "We're going to get that sorted out. In the meantime, if you'd like to find a seat." She gestured toward the main hall without finishing the sentence. Carol put her hand on my arm. I kept my smile in place. A young usher named Jake, I remember his name because he was the only person who looked me directly in the eye that day, walked us to a table near the back of the reception hall. Table 11, against the far wall, near the hallway that led to the restrooms. "Is this where the groom's mother usually sits?" Carol asked him, not unkindly. Jake looked uncomfortable. "I'm just following the chart, ma'am. I'm sorry." I touched his arm. "It's all right, sweetheart. Thank you." He walked away quickly, the way young people do when they feel bad about something they can't fix. Carol turned to me. Her eyes were steady, the way they always are when she's trying not to show that she's angry on my behalf. "Don't let this ruin your day," she said. I squeezed her hand. "I won't." But even as I said it, something small and certain settled into place in my chest. This was not an oversight. A mistake looks different from the inside. An oversight comes with someone rushing over, flustered and apologetic, insisting on making it right. This was quiet, deliberate, the kind of thing that is done carefully and left for someone else to discover. I had been placed at table 11 like a piece of furniture that doesn't quite fit anywhere, so someone tucked it in a corner and hoped no one would notice. The ceremony was beautiful. I will say that, because it was true, and I was raised to tell the truth. The flowers were extraordinary. The music was gentle and lovely. The light came through the tall windows in long gold stripes across the white floor. Thomas stood at the altar, and he was the most handsome I had ever seen him. His father's broad shoulders, his father's dark eyes, the same quiet dignity that James carried in a room. When Diane walked down the aisle in her ivory silk dress, the guests made that collective sound, a soft, collective exhale, the sound rooms make when something takes their breath away. She was breathtaking. I will say that too, but I watched my son's hands. Thomas's hands were clasped in front of him, and his knuckles were white. His eyes swept the room once, quick, searching, and when they found me, far back at the edge of the hall, something crossed his face, something I couldn't name from that distance. He held my gaze for just a moment, and then Diane reached the altar and took his hands in hers, and he looked at her. I looked down at my own hands, the pearl brooch at my collar, James's mother's brooch. "Hold on," I told myself. Just hold on. The reception was everything the ceremony had promised. Louder, brighter, full of laughter and the clink of glasses and the smell of expensive food. The string quartet gave way to a DJ. People danced. People toasted. The room vibrated with the energy of a celebration in full swing. I stood near the cake table, not because I chose it, but because I had run out of other places to stand. I had walked past tables of people I didn't know, smiled at a few faces that didn't smile back, and looked twice for someone, anyone, who might say, "You must be Thomas's mother. I've heard so much about you." No one said it, because I would later understand, no one had heard anything about me. Or rather, they had heard things, just not the right things. Carol had gone to find the restroom. I was alone, holding a glass of water, watching the room. Then I turned, just slightly, just to let a server pass behind me with a tray of champagne, and my elbow brushed the edge of something. Ivory silk. I turned back and Diane was there. So close I could see the pearl clips in her hair. Her eyes were sharp. Her jaw was tight. She had been moving through the crowd and I had appeared in her path like an inconvenience. "Oh," I said immediately, stepping back. "I'm so sorry. I didn't see you. I didn't mean..." Her hand moved so fast I didn't process it until it was over. The slap, the ringing in my ears, the burning on my cheek. 300 people went quiet. "Look at you," she said again, and her voice was the voice of someone who has never once been told that they went too far. "You clumsy old woman, don't you dare touch my dress again." She turned away, just like that, like I was a smudge she had already wiped clean. The music started again. The room exhaled. People looked away, the way people look away from things that make them uncomfortable. Not because they don't care, but because caring would require them to do something. And they had champagne to finish and dances to get back to. I stood there with my hand pressed to my cheek. I did not cry. I thought about James, about the way he used to say, "Maggie, the strongest thing a person can do is stay standing when everything in them wants to fall." So I stayed standing. I moved toward the garden doors, just to breathe, just to get out from under the lights for a moment. And I found a small chair near the edge of the room, half hidden behind an arrangement of eucalyptus and white flowers. That's where she found me. Judge Patricia Elmore, 71 years old, silver-haired, with the kind of posture that comes from 40 years on a bench, and the kind of eyes that have heard too many lies to be fooled by a polite smile. She had been sitting at table 11 when Carol and I arrived. She had watched the whole thing. She sat down beside me without asking. I appreciated that. I didn't have the energy to say, "Please sit." "Margaret," she said. "Maggie," I corrected, because even then, even in that moment, I am who I am. "Maggie," she folded her hands in her lap. "I need to tell you something, not as a guest at this wedding. As someone who has a conscience and who has been quiet for long enough today." I looked at her. My cheek still burned. The pearl brooch pressed against my collarbone. "There are people in this room," she said, "who knew exactly who you were when Diane struck you, and not one of them moved." "I noticed," I said. "They didn't move," Patricia continued, "because a week ago, Diane Whitmore called several of Thomas's closest friends and colleagues. She told them that you had not approved of this marriage, that you had spoken badly about her to the family, that Thomas had spent years struggling to, and I am quoting her exactly, break free from your control. The garden doors were cool against my back. Inside the hall, someone laughed, high and bright and oblivious. She called you difficult, Patricia said. She told them Thomas was finally free. I heard each word. I felt each word. She called you, I said slowly. Personally. Personally, Patricia confirmed. She did not call me because she knew me well enough to know it wouldn't work. But she called enough people that the room was already decided before you walked through those doors. I looked out through the garden doors at the dark trees beyond the lit path. She prepared this, I said. It wasn't a question. Patricia didn't treat it like one. Yes, she said simply. She did. I sat with that for a moment. The sound of the party continued behind us. Music, laughter, the percussion of 100 simultaneous conversations. 300 people celebrating a beginning that had already been carefully constructed around my absence. Then I heard a voice cut through all of it. Mom? I looked up. Thomas was crossing the room toward me, weaving through the crowd, his bow tie slightly loosened. his face arranged in the expression I have known since he was 4 years old, and something was wrong. The expression that means he already knows it's bad before he's heard it. He reached me and crouched down to my eye level, the way he used to do when I was sitting at the kitchen table after a hard day, and he wanted me to look at him. "Mom, what happened?" Before I could answer, I felt the room shift. Diane appeared at his shoulder, and in her eyes, just for a fraction of a second before the warmth flooded back in, I saw it. She hadn't expected him to find me this quickly. She recovered instantly. Her hand found his arm. Her voice was soft with concern. "Is everything okay, babe?" Thomas didn't look at her. His eyes were on my face, on my cheek. A voice came from behind me, steady, unhurried, carrying the particular authority of someone who has spoken truth in difficult rooms for 40 years. "Thomas." He looked at Patricia Elmore. "Your mother was struck," Patricia said quietly, "by the bride." The room around us went very still. Not the whole room. The party continued, oblivious. But our small pocket of it, the 4 of us, the truth landing among us like something dropped from a great height. Thomas turned to look at his wife, and for just a moment, just one long, suspended moment, the only sound was the music from across the room, and the distant laughter, and the slow exhale of a son who was beginning to understand that the day he had built his future on was not what he had thought it was. "You hit my mother," he said. Diane's expression shifted through 3 things in 1 second: surprise, calculation, softness, and landed on softness. "Thomas, I didn't know she was your—" "That," he said very quietly, "changes nothing." The wedding was not over. It had barely begun, and whatever Diane Whitmore had built, carefully, quietly, over 18 months, was about to come apart. Not because I demanded it, not because Patricia Elmore pressed the issue, but because the truth, once it begins moving, does not stop for anyone. Not even a bride in ivory silk, not even on her wedding day. Diane cried. I want to be precise about this, because the crying matters. It was not the kind of crying that comes from being caught. It was not messy or sudden or out of control. It was the kind of crying that is deployed, the way a person reaches for an umbrella when they see rain coming. Measured, timed, exactly wet enough to be convincing. Her eyes filled. Her chin trembled just slightly. She pressed 2 fingers to her lips and looked at Thomas with an expression that managed to be simultaneously wounded and apologetic, and she said, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, "Thomas, I've been so stressed. The coordinator changed the flower arrangements this morning, and I didn't sleep last night, and I didn't know who she was. I swear to you, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, Margaret." She used my name, not Mrs. Calloway, not Thomas's mom. She said Margaret, the way someone says a name when they've practiced saying it, when they've made sure they know it so they can use it at exactly the right moment. Carol appeared at my side. She had come back from the restroom and had taken in the scene in seconds, the way Carol always does. She leaned close to my ear. "She knew your name," Carol murmured. She knew it straight away, no hesitation. I nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Thomas was looking at Diane. I could see the pull in him, the 2 directions working on him at once, the way they had probably been working on him for 18 months. He was a good man. He was a fair man. He had been raised to hear both sides before he decided anything. And here was his mother with a red cheek, and here was his wife with tears on hers, and the room was full of people, and the music was playing, and it was his wedding day. Diane reached for his hand, gently, the way you reach for something fragile. "Can we please just get through today?" she said softly. "For us? We can talk about everything tonight, I promise. But please, not here, not now." I watched my son. I watched him the way I had watched him his entire life, from across schoolyards and sports fields and hospital waiting rooms. I knew the exact moment a decision moved through him. It lived in his shoulders first, then his jaw. His shoulders dropped a fraction of an inch. "Mom," he said, turning to me, "I'm going to fix this, I promise." "I know," I said. He squeezed my hand. Then he let Diane lead him back toward the center of the room, back toward the light and the music and the 300 people who had no idea what had just happened 5 feet away from the eucalyptus arrangement. Patricia Elmore watched them go. She said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, "He's not a weak man. He's a man who has been managed very carefully for a very long time. There's a difference. I know, I said again. But knowing the difference didn't make it hurt less. The next 20 minutes were the loneliest of my life. I say that as a woman who sat with her husband while he died. I say that as a woman who drove home from that hospital alone and walked into a house that was completely silent for the first time in 34 years of marriage. I know what loneliness feels like from the inside. This was different. This was being alone in a room full of people who had been told a story about you and who believed it. I could feel it. The glances that skimmed over me without landing. The small adjustments people made when they passed. Not moving away exactly, just not moving toward. The way a table of Thomas's colleagues smiled at each other when I walked by. Smiles that stopped just short of including me. Diane had been thorough. Carol brought me a plate of food I didn't eat and sat beside me with the particular kind of silent loyalty that only 40 years of friendship can produce. She didn't try to fix it or minimize it. She just stayed. That was enough. That was everything, actually. It was at table 11, our corner table, our exile table, that Patricia Elmore told me the rest of what she knew. She waited until Carol had gone to get us both coffee. Then she turned to me with her hands folded on the table and spoke in the direct, unhurried way of someone who has decided that the truth is more important than comfort. "Last Tuesday," she said, "Diane called me." I looked at her. She called several people. I know of at least 8. She told each of us a version of the same story. Patricia paused. That you had refused to meet her more than once. That when you did meet, you sat with your arms crossed and found fault with everything she said. That you had called members of Thomas's extended family and told them he was making a mistake. My sweet tea sat untouched on the table between us. She told me, Patricia continued, that Thomas had spent years of his adult life trying to establish independence from you, that you called his workplace regularly, that you showed up unannounced, that you monitored his finances. Each sentence arrived like something dropped on my chest, not because I didn't know they were lies, but because someone had sat down and constructed them, had chosen them carefully, had decided which lies would be most believable, most damaging, most difficult to disprove in a room full of people who didn't know me. She told me you were difficult, Patricia said, that the family had learned to manage you, that today, the seating, the arrangement, was intentional, to give Thomas room to begin his marriage without the weight of your disapproval. I pressed my fingers against the tablecloth. The linen was stiff and cool. "And you believed her?" I asked, not accusingly, genuinely. Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I had no reason not to," she said. "I don't know you well. I know Thomas through his father's professional circles. I had never met you in person." She paused again. "But then I watched you walk in today, and I watched how this room treated you, and I watched the way you sat at this table, not angry, not demanding, not performing any of the things she described. Just a woman in a green dress who brought a brooch and didn't know where to sit." She looked at me steadily. "I've spent 40 years on a bench watching people tell stories," she said. "I know the difference between a difficult woman and a woman who has been made to seem difficult." I looked down at the pearl brooch at my collar. James's mother's brooch. The one I had carried across 4 hours of interstate highway to give to a woman who had spent the previous week building a case against me. "She's afraid of something," I said. Patricia nodded slowly. "Yes, the question is what?" I found out sooner than either of us expected. Carol came back with the coffee and I excused myself. I needed air. I needed 2 minutes of quiet. I needed to stand somewhere that wasn't being watched. I slipped out through the garden doors and stood on the stone path outside, breathing in the cool April evening, listening to the muffled sound of the party through the glass. I heard the door open behind me. I turned, expecting Carol, but it was Thomas. He walked toward me with his jacket open and his hands in his pockets, and he looked for just a moment like the 20-year-old boy who used to sit on our back porch after James was first diagnosed and stare at the yard without speaking. He sat down on the low stone wall at the edge of the path. I sat beside him. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. The Atlanta night was soft and warm. Inside, someone was giving a toast, the muffled rise and fall of a microphone voice, laughter, applause. "Mom," Thomas said, "has she ever been unkind to you before?" She didn't know me well enough to be unkind, I said carefully. We only met once. He was quiet. I know, he said. She told you something different? He looked at his hands. She told me you didn't want to meet her, that she had suggested getting together several times and you had made excuses. She said the one time you did meet, you spent the whole visit making it clear you disapproved of her. I thought about the blue-rimmed china, the sweet tea, the good linen napkins I had ironed that morning, the question I asked about her family that she answered by looking at her phone. Thomas, I said. He said, I made sweet tea. I used your grandmother's china. He closed his eyes. I know, Mom. His voice was barely above a whisper. I know. She told me things, consistently, for months, and He stopped. You chose to believe her, I said. Not with cruelty, just with the plainness of it. I'm sorry. It was the smallest sentence I had ever heard him say. It was also the most honest. I put my hand over his on the cold stone wall. You are going to have to think very carefully, I said, about what else you have believed. He looked at me. Before I could say anything more, the garden door opened. Diane stepped out. She was not alone. Beside her was a man I recognized from photographs, her older brother, Brett Whitmore. Tall, dark-suited, with the careful blankness of someone who has learned to keep his face neutral as a matter of survival. He stood slightly behind his sister in a way that was not quite supportive, more like a man who has been brought along and isn't entirely sure he should have come. Diane looked at Thomas and me on the stone wall with an expression that reset itself into something soft before it finished arriving. There you are, she said. People are asking for you, babe. They want to do the cake cutting. In a minute, Thomas said. A pause, the kind that has weight. Thomas. Her voice was still gentle, but underneath it something had tightened. It's our wedding. I know what day it is. She glanced at me, quickly, assessing, and then back to him. Can we please not do this here? Thomas stood up slowly. He was several inches taller than his wife, and in that moment he seemed to remember it. You told people my mother called my workplace, he said, regularly. Diane's expression didn't crack. I said she had called once, Thomas said. She called once, to tell me my father was dying. I had my phone off. She called the front desk because she had no other way to reach me. Diane said nothing. You knew that story, Thomas said slowly. I told you that story. I told you what that day felt like, driving through the night, not knowing if I'd make it in time. He took a breath. And you used it. The garden was very quiet. Brett Whitmore looked at the ground. Diane lifted her chin. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost the softness. What was underneath was harder and more honest than anything she had said all day. I needed people to understand the dynamic, she said. I needed them to see that she has always been my mother, Thomas said. She has always been my mother. She's been a weight around your neck. The words hit the garden like something physical. I felt Carol's absence. I felt Patricia's absence. I felt the absence of anyone who might have softened what happened next, because what happened next needed no softening. It needed to be heard exactly as it was. A weight, Thomas repeated. You know it's true. Diane's composure had returned. That particular composure of someone who believes the best defense is forward motion. Every milestone in your life, she's been there, hovering, calling, meeting. You couldn't take the job in Seattle because of her. You didn't go to the conference in London because of her. You have spent your entire adult life making decisions around a woman who raised me alone after my father died. Diane stopped. Who worked 2 jobs so I could finish my degree without debt? Who drove 14 hours round trip to help me move into my first apartment and never once complained? Who has asked for exactly nothing from me except a phone call on Tuesday evenings? His voice was shaking now, not with anger but with something more dangerous than anger, with clarity. That's the weight you're describing. Diane looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, and I will hear these words for the rest of my life. Thomas, you're not going to be successful in this world if you keep letting her make you small. The silence that followed was complete. Brett Whitmore looked up from the ground. His jaw worked once, like he was deciding something. Thomas turned to look at his brother-in-law. Brett met his eyes, and something passed between them. some understanding that required no words. Thomas turned back to his wife. "Tell me about my promotion," he said. It was not a question anyone expected. It came from nowhere, from some instinct Thomas had been suppressing, and it landed in the garden like a match struck in a dark room. Diane went very still. "What?" "My promotion last March. Senior director. You told me it was your networking, that you'd put in a good word with the right people." He watched her face. "Tell me exactly what that means." She told him, not all at once, not willingly. But Thomas had his father's patience and his mother's ability to remain completely still when stillness was required. And eventually, the way water finds every crack, the truth came out. Diane had not simply networked. She had approached Sandra Holloway, the executive assistant to Thomas's CEO, a woman who had worked at the company for 19 years and who knew where every professional body was buried. And she had made Sandra an offer. Not in explicit terms. Diane was too careful for explicit terms. But she had made it clear that she was in possession of certain information. Information about the CEO's financial arrangements with a consulting firm. Arrangements that were not illegal, but were deeply embarrassing. The kind of thing that, if it found its way to the board, would make a powerful man's life very complicated. She had made it clear that this information would stay where it was, quietly, as long as things went well for Thomas. "You blackmailed someone," Thomas said, "to get me a promotion I didn't know I needed help getting." "I leveraged a situation," Diane said. "That's different." "That is not different." "It's how things work, Thomas. In the real world, the world you were too naive to see. You committed a crime. I protected you, without telling me, because you would have stopped me." He stared at her. "Yes," he said. "I would have." Brett Whitmore turned away, not dramatically, just away. Like a man who has been holding a door open for too long and has finally decided to let it close. I sat on the stone wall and I thought about the Tuesday phone calls, the way Thomas had stopped calling, the way Diane had, over 18 months, quietly and methodically, rebuilt the story of who Thomas was, not just for the people at this wedding, but for Thomas himself. She had convinced him that independence looked like distance, that strength looked like silence, that loving his mother was something to be managed, minimized, grown out of. And it had almost worked. The almost is the only reason we were standing in this garden. The almost is the only reason my son was still looking at his wife with clear eyes instead of grateful ones. The door from the garden opened one more time. Carol stood in the frame with her hand still on the handle. Behind her, visible through the glass, the wedding continued. Oblivious, luminous, 300 people in their finest clothes celebrating something that had just changed completely in a garden where no one was watching. Carol looked at me. I looked at my son. Thomas looked at his wife. And Diane, for the first time that I had seen, looked afraid. Not of losing him, of something else. Something she hadn't told us yet. Fear on Diane Whitmore's face lasted exactly 4 seconds. I counted, not because I was looking for it, but because I had spent the last 6 hours studying her expressions the way you study weather when you know a storm is coming. 4 seconds of something unguarded and honest. Then the composure returned, smooth and practiced as a second skin, and she was herself again. Chin lifted, shoulders back, eyes clear. But I had seen it, and Thomas had seen it. "What else?" he said. Diane blinked. "I don't know what you mean." "Yes, you do." He hadn't moved. His voice was level in the way that very still water is level. Not calm, just surface. "There's something else. I can see it. Thomas, we've been out here for 20 minutes. Our guests? Diane." She looked at him for a long moment. The April night moved around us, a soft wind through the garden trees, the distant percussion of the party inside, the smell of the white peonies from the ceremony that someone had moved into clay pots along the stone path. Then she said, "Come back inside, both of you. We can discuss the rest privately." "The rest," Thomas repeated. "Please." Brett Whitmore turned back around. He had been facing the garden wall with the posture of a man who wanted very badly to be somewhere else. Now he looked at his sister with an expression I recognized. The expression of someone who has watched a person they love make the same mistake in 100 different rooms and has run out of ways to stop them. "Diane," he said quietly, "don't." She glanced at him. "Stay out of this. I've stayed out of it for 3 years. His voice was tired. Not angry, tired, which is worse. "I'm done staying out of it." Diane's eyes flashed. "Brett, Sandra Holloway is inside that room," he said. The garden went very quiet. Thomas turned slowly toward his brother-in-law. "What did you just say?" Brett looked at Thomas steadily. "Sandra Holloway, your CEO's assistant. Diane told me she was on your guest list. I assumed she wouldn't come." He paused. "She came. We went back inside. Not because Diane asked us to, because Thomas made a decision. The kind of decision that moves through a person all at once, like a current switching on. And he walked through the garden door with his head up and his jaw set, and there was nothing to do but follow. The reception hall was at full luminous pitch. The cake had been delayed long enough that the caterers were beginning to look anxious. The DJ had shifted to slower songs. Couples moved on the dance floor in that particular golden hour haze that expensive weddings manufacture. Everything soft lit and lovely. The world narrowed to this room, this night, this beginning. Sandra Holloway was not dancing. She was sitting at a table near the far window, alone, her hands wrapped around a glass of water she wasn't drinking. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s, with silver-streaked hair, and the particular stillness of someone who has been carrying something heavy for a long time and has almost forgotten what it felt like not to. When Thomas approached her table, she looked up, and something in her face, some long-held tension, released by a fraction, the way a door eases open when pressure on the other side finally shifts. "Thomas," she said. "Sandra." He sat down across from her. I sat beside him. Carol appeared from somewhere and took the chair at my left without a word, the way Carol always does. Diane stood at Thomas's shoulder. Brett stood further back, close enough to witness, far enough to make clear he had chosen his position. Sandra looked at Diane once. Then she looked at Thomas and did not look away again. "I've been wanting to tell you something," she said. "For 8 months. I couldn't. I told myself I was scared. But watching what's happened tonight..." She stopped, started again. "I'm done being scared." Thomas said nothing. He waited. "What Diane told you about your promotion, the networking, the good word, that's not what happened." Sandra's voice was even, the voice of someone who has rehearsed this moment enough times that emotion has been worn smooth by repetition. "She came to my office last February. She told me she had information about Mr. Garrett's arrangement with the Meridian Group. She didn't threaten me directly. She didn't have to. The implication was sufficient." "I understand," Thomas said quietly. "I want you to know that I considered going to the board. I considered resigning." Sandra paused. "I have a daughter in her second year of college. I have a mother in assisted living. I made a choice I'm not proud of, and I have thought about it every day since." Thomas leaned forward slightly. "Sandra, I'm going to make this right, whatever it takes." She nodded once and something in her shoulders descended an inch. Then she reached into her evening bag and placed a small folded piece of paper on the table between them. "There's one more thing," she said, and I debated whether to say anything. "But you need to know." Thomas unfolded the paper. I watched his face as he read it. I watched the color leave it. Slowly, the way light leaves a room when the sun goes behind a cloud. His eyes moved across whatever was written there twice. Then he set the paper down very carefully, the way you set down something fragile, and he looked up at his wife. "The emergency account," he said. Diane said nothing. "The account I opened for my mother after my father died. The one I funded every month for 6 years. He touched the edge of the paper. "You moved money out of it." Still nothing from Diane. $23,000, he said, over 14 months. The number dropped into the room like a stone into still water. I felt Carol's hand find mine under the table. I let her hold it. I had not known. I want to be clear about that. I had not known. Thomas had opened that account without telling me, because that is who he is, or who he was before 18 months of careful reconstruction. A man who took care of his mother quietly, without fanfare, without expecting acknowledgement. He had added Diane's name to it before the wedding, he would later tell me, because she had asked him to consolidate their finances, and he had trusted her, because she was going to be his wife, and trusting your wife seemed like the right thing to do. Diane had accessed it 11 months ago. The withdrawals were structured carefully, small enough individually not to trigger automatic flags, spread across enough months to look like routine transactions. She had used it to pay a strategic image consultant, a woman in New York who specialized in building professional profiles for executives' spouses and creating the particular kind of social and professional presence that opens certain doors. She had used my son's gift to me to build a version of herself. She had spent James's memory like currency. I heard myself make a sound, small and involuntary, the kind of sound that escapes before you can stop it. Carol's hand tightened on mine. Thomas looked at me. His eyes were wide and dark and filled with something I had not seen in them since the morning his father died. "Mom," he said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "You didn't know," I said. "I should have." "You didn't know," I said again, more firmly, because that was the truth, and the truth was all we had left to work with. I don't know exactly when Pastor Robert Elgin had come to stand at the edge of our circle. He was simply there, the way certain presences are simply there when they're needed, appearing without announcement, without theater. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with white hair and the deliberate stillness of someone who has learned that silence, used correctly, is more powerful than any word. He had officiated the ceremony 2 hours ago with a warmth that had made even the most distracted guests pay attention. Diane saw him first. Her expression shifted. Relief, briefly, the instinct to find an ally, and she opened her mouth. He spoke before she could. "Diane," not unkindly, but with a finality that foreclosed argument. "I won't be doing what you asked me to do." She went still. 3 weeks ago, Pastor Elgin said, and he was not speaking only to Diane now. He was speaking to the small circle that had gathered around our table, to Brett, to Carol, to Sandra, to the few nearby guests who had drifted close enough to hear. "You came to my office. You told me that Thomas's mother was emotionally unstable, that she had a history of making scenes at family events. You asked me, specifically, that if she caused any disruption today, I should intervene and ask her to leave the premises." Somewhere in the hall, the DJ began a slow song. The absurdity of it, the gentle romantic swell of music behind this conversation, was almost unbearable. "You asked a pastor," Thomas said slowly, "to remove my mother from my wedding." "Yes," Pastor Elgin said, "she did." He looked at Diane with an expression that was not angry. It was something more difficult to bear than anger. It was disappointment, the deep and particular disappointment of a man who had hoped he was wrong about what he was seeing. I told her then that I would not. I told her that my role was to unite people, not separate them, and I told her that I would be watching today. He turned to me then. "Mrs. Calloway, I watched you walk in this evening. I watched where they seated you. I watched you sit at that table alone, with grace, without complaint, and I watched what happened near the cake table." He paused. "I should have spoken sooner. I chose to wait and see. That was a pastoral failure, and I apologize for it." I looked at this man who had married my son to a woman who had asked him to remove me from the building, and I said the only thing I could manage. "Thank you for speaking now." Brett Whitmore stepped forward then. Not dramatically, just forward. He stood beside Pastor Elgin with the quiet resolution of a man who has finally, after years of hesitation, decided that the cost of staying quiet is higher than the cost of being heard. "I knew," he said, simply, flatly. "Not everything, but enough." Diane turned to her brother. "Brett, I knew she had manipulated the guest list. I knew about the calls she made last week." He looked at his sister, not with anger, but with a sorrow that seemed older than tonight, older than this wedding, something that had been accumulating for years. I told myself it was just Diane being Diane, that she was ambitious, that she was protecting herself. He stopped. "I watched her hit this woman tonight and I didn't say anything. That's on me. I'm saying something now." Diane looked around the circle. For the first time since I had met her, in my living room with her travel mug and her polite non-answers, in the wedding hall with her ivory silk and her pearl clips, she looked like what she was. Not a polished, composed, impenetrable surface. A person. Frightened and cornered and very, very tired of holding everything together by force of will. I almost felt it then, the impulse toward pity. Almost. Then I thought about James's money, about the account Thomas had funded quietly for 6 years, about the 14 months of careful, methodical withdrawals, and I held the pearl brooch at my collar and I stayed still. You want to know what I was protecting? She said it to no one in particular, or to everyone. Her voice had changed. The performance had finally dropped, and what was underneath was raw and strange and somehow more dangerous than anything she had shown us before. I grew up with nothing, she said. My father worked in a plant that closed when I was 11. My mother cleaned houses. We had a car that broke down twice a year, and a house that smelled like mildew in the winter, and I wore the same 3 outfits to school for 2 years, and not one person, ever looked at me like I was going to be anything. No one spoke. I built everything myself, she said. Every door I walked through, I pried open. Every room I'm in, I fought to get into. And I am very, very good at fighting. She looked at Thomas. When I met you, I saw someone brilliant who was being held back by small thinking, by comfort, by his mother, Thomas said. By the belief that staying small was the same as being safe. My mother never made me small. She made you Tennessee, Diane said. When you could have been anywhere. The room, our small, tight circle within the room, was absolutely silent. Even the music seemed to dim, as though the building itself was listening. Thomas looked at his wife for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was quiet enough that I had to lean slightly forward to hear him. I love Tennessee, he said. I love the porch where my father taught me to play chess. I love the kitchen where my mother made lemon pound cake every Sunday. I love the bedroom where I lay awake at 14 thinking about who I wanted to be, and the window I used to climb out of to go sit on the roof and look at the stars. He paused. That's not small, Diane. That's the whole world. You just couldn't see it. Diane pressed her lips together. You're going to throw everything away, she said, for sentiment. No, he said, for something real. He reached into his jacket pocket. I didn't understand what he was doing at first. Then he produced a small folded card, ivory, with his name printed at the top. The marriage certificate, still unsigned. The signing had been delayed, pushed to after the reception in the informal way that some weddings arrange things. He set it on the table. He did not tear it. He did not make a scene of it. He simply set it down and stepped back, and in the act of stepping back was everything. The clarity of a man who has decided completely and without theater what he is and what he is not willing to do. I won't sign it, he said. Diane stared at the card. Thomas, I won't build a home on a foundation made of other people's pain. He looked at her, not with hatred, I want to be clear about that, because Thomas was not built for hatred and never has been. He looked at her with a sorrow that was genuine and complicated and very, very adult. I think somewhere in you there is a person who was hurt very badly and who learned that the only safety is control. I think you genuinely believed that what you were doing was right. I think you confused love with management and called it protection. Diane said nothing. But my mother sat at table 11 tonight, he said, with a brooch at her collar that she brought to give to you. And you hit her, and you spent her money, and you asked a pastor to throw her out of the building. He picked up the unsigned certificate. I'm not angry at who you are. I'm just not able to stay. He turned to Pastor Elgin. I'd like to say something to the room, he said. If that's all right. Pastor Elgin nodded slowly and without hesitation. Thomas walked to the center of the reception hall. The DJ, seeing him approach, faded the music down. The dance floor emptied in that instinctive way that crowds respond to gravity, moving toward the center, toward whatever is about to happen. 300 people, white peonies, the smell of expensive food, the remnants of a celebration that had been meticulously planned to the last detail. Thomas stood at the microphone and looked out at the room. He looked in that moment exactly like his father. The same breadth of shoulders, the same quiet dignity, the same willingness to stand in the open when it would have been so much easier to find somewhere to hide. I want to thank every one of you for coming tonight, he said. You dressed up, you traveled, you brought gifts and good wishes, and you gave us your Saturday evening. That means everything to me. The room was very still. I have to be honest with you, he said, because I was raised by a woman who taught me that honesty, even when it's costly, is the only thing that holds a life together. He found me in the crowd. I was still at table 11, Carol on one side, Patricia Elmore on the other, Brett Whitmore standing a few feet back with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the floor. Thomas looked at me the way he used to look at me across schoolyards, across hospital waiting rooms. across the enormous distance that grief puts between people who love each other. "The wedding is not going forward," he said. "I am deeply sorry for any disruption or confusion this causes, but I will not stand here and build something on a foundation that I know to be broken." Gasps, whispers, the particular electricity of 300 people processing something they did not expect. "I'll say only this," Thomas continued. "If you came here tonight for a celebration, then celebrate something real instead. Celebrate the people in your life who showed up for you when it was hard. Celebrate the ones who drove 4 hours to be there, who sat in the back of the room and never once complained, who brought a brooch to give away and didn't." He looked at me. "I'm sorry it took me this long to see what was right in front of me." Diane left, not dramatically. That was the thing. There was no final scene, no last word, no door slammed. She simply gathered herself, the composure reassembled one more time, possibly out of sheer habit, and walked through the main doors of the Hartwell Grand and did not look back. Brett Whitmore watched her go. Then he walked across the room to where I was sitting, and he crouched down the way Thomas had crouched earlier, to be at eye level, to be equal, and he said, "Mrs. Calloway, I am sorry for what my sister did, and for what I didn't do." I looked at this man who had stood in a garden and said enough and stepped forward when it mattered. "You spoke," I said. "When it counted, that's not nothing." He nodded once, tightly. Then he stood and walked toward the doors his sister had passed through. And the last I saw of Brett Whitmore that night, he was outside in the April dark, standing very still with his hands in his pockets, looking at nothing in particular. Carol drove home. I had offered to take a turn, but she pointed at the passenger seat in a way that foreclosed argument, and I didn't argue, because I was 65 years old, and my cheek was still faintly sore, and I had been standing in heels since 11 o'clock that morning. We didn't talk much for the first 2 hours. The interstate unrolled ahead of us, dark and straight, the lights of Atlanta fading in the rearview mirror. Carol played the radio softly, an oldies station, Patsy Cline, and then Glenn Campbell, and then something I didn't recognize. Somewhere around Chattanooga, Carol said, "You know what I keep thinking about?" "What?" "The sweet tea, the blue china." She shook her head. "You ironed the napkins, Maggie." "I always iron the napkins." "I know you do." She glanced at me sideways. "That's the whole point." I looked out the window at the dark Tennessee hills. The dogwoods were blooming early this year. I had been right about that. 3 months later, Thomas reported himself to his company's HR department. He explained everything: Sandra's coercion, the promotion, the circumstances. He brought documentation. He sat across from his CEO in a glass-walled office and told the truth without qualification or excuse. The CEO, a man named Gerald Garrett, who had, by Thomas's account, the particular weariness of someone who has seen enough to be rarely surprised, listened without interruption. Then he said, "Most people in your position would have stayed quiet and hoped it went away." Thomas said, "My father taught me that the truth has a way of coming out. It's better to be the one who brings it." Gerald Garrett looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, "Your promotion stands. You earned it. What happened around it doesn't change what you are." Thomas called me that evening. Not a text, a call, 6:30 on a Tuesday. I answered on the second ring. The money was recovered. Not all of it, and not quickly. There were lawyers and accountants and conversations I wasn't party to. But by September, 81% of what had been taken from the account was returned. Thomas transferred the rest from his own savings without telling me, and I only found out because Carol's nephew works at the same bank and has never learned to mind his business. I told Thomas I was going to scold him about it. He said, "Try." I didn't. Brett Whitmore sent me a card in June, handwritten on plain cream stationery. Not a card from the store, just a sheet of paper folded in thirds. His handwriting was careful and slightly cramped, like someone who doesn't write by hand often. "Mrs. Calloway," it said, "my sister did wrong by you. She did wrong by a lot of people for a long time. I'm not sure I understand all of it yet, and I'm not sure she does either. What I know is that you deserved better from this family, and I hope that someday you'll accept an apology from someone who should have spoken sooner. Brett Whitmore," I wrote back. A real letter, 2 pages, on the blue stationery I keep in the desk drawer in the sitting room. I told him that speaking when it matters is worth more than speaking early, and I meant every word. He wrote back. We've exchanged 4 letters since. I think he is trying to understand his sister. I think he is trying to understand himself. I think those are not always different projects. One Sunday in September, Thomas drove up from Atlanta. We sat on the back porch, the same porch where his father taught him chess, the same porch where he used to sit after James was diagnosed and stare at the yard without speaking. The dogwoods had long since finished blooming, and the yard was full of late summer green, thick and soft in the afternoon light. I made sweet tea. I used the blue-rimmed china because I always use the good china for Thomas. We talked about his work, about a hiking trip he was planning, about the gutters, which needed cleaning again. Small things, real things. The conversation of 2 people who have come back to each other from a long distance and are grateful for the smallness of ordinary life. After a while, Thomas looked down at my hand. The pearl brooch sat on the table between us. I had set it there without quite deciding to. Taken it from my jewelry box that morning and carried it to the porch the way you carry something you've been meaning to deal with and haven't. You still have it, he said. I didn't give it to the right person. He was quiet for a moment. Keep it, he said. You'll know when. I looked at my son in the September light, 34 years old, his father's shoulders, his father's eyes, a good man who had been, for a while, inside a story someone else was telling about him, and who had found his way back to his own. I already know, I said. He looked at me. It belongs to you, I said, for when you find someone who deserves what it means. Thomas looked at the brooch for a long time, then he picked it up and held it in his palm, carefully, the way he used to hold things as a small boy, with his whole hand curved around them, making sure nothing could fall. Dad's mom gave you this, he said, on our wedding day. What did she say when she gave it to you? I thought about Evelyn Calloway, 70 years old and sharp as glass, with the same dark eyes as Thomas, and the same absolute refusal to pretend. She had pressed the brooch into my hand outside the church and said, Maggie, the women in this family are its backbone. Don't you ever let anyone tell you otherwise. I told Thomas. He closed his hand around the brooch and held it. After a while, the light shifted across the yard, and the birds in the back maples started their evening argument, and somewhere down the street a lawnmower started up, and the world went on being ordinary and specific and irreplaceable. Thank you for not leaving, Thomas said finally. That night, you could have left. I thought about it, I said honestly. What made you stay? I looked at my son. You, I said. You were always going to come find me. I just had to be there when you did. I have thought about that night many times in the months since. I have thought about Table 11 and the sweet tea and the blue-rimmed china and the moment a hand moved faster than I could see. I have thought about what it costs to stay standing when everything in you wants to fall. I have thought about what James would say. I think he would say what he always said, that strength is not the absence of pain. It is what you choose to do while the pain is still present. I am 65 years old. I bake lemon pound cake for the church bake sale every April. I keep butterscotch candies on my kitchen counter. I cry at the end of every episode of Call the Midwife, without fail, every single time. I wear the sage green dress when the occasion is right, and I keep the pearl brooch on my nightstand now, next to the photo of Thomas at 9 years old with his gap-toothed smile and his red crayon writing and his whole heart on a piece of paper. For Mom, the best person in the world, some things do not change. The truth has a way of making sure of it. If this story moved you, if any part of it felt true, then you already know what I know. The most powerful thing a person can do is simply remain. Stay standing, stay honest, stay present, and trust that the people who are meant to find you will. They always do.